She was a church-going wife with a picture-perfect life, but when her husband was found dead, a trail of secret texts, forbidden love, and a chilling murder plot unraveled. This is the dark, twisted story of Sabrina Limon, a woman whose faith and betrayal collided in one unforgettable crime.
Sabrina and Robert Limon were a married couple living in Silver Lakes, California, a quiet desert community far from city noise. To friends and neighbors, they were the picture of suburban success: social, religious, loving, and deeply connected. Robert worked for a railway company, a steady man who provided stability. Sabrina was the radiant wife, active in church and raising their two young kids. They hosted barbecues, laughed in church halls, and posed for family photos. No one could have guessed that under the surface, cracks were spreading fast. Their marriage wasn't without struggle. Financial stress, spiritual expectations, and growing emotional distance had begun to strain their bond. Around 2012, their relationship shifted. Sabrina confessed that she was unhappy, feeling disconnected from Robert despite the life they'd built. That's when Jonathan Hearn entered the picture, a young firefighter and devout Christian. He met Sabrina through mutual church circles and was immediately drawn to her. Their friendship turned into flirtation, and from there, a full-fledged affair ignited behind closed doors. Jonathan, over a decade younger, was captivated by her beauty, her sadness, and her spiritual aura. Sabrina found in him what she felt Robert no longer gave her: passion, attention, and emotional safety. They texted constantly, hiding their relationship through code words and burner phones. Their love grew bolder, and soon, whispers of wanting a future together emerged. But there was one obstacle they couldn't ignore: Robert. In their twisted logic, his removal became not unthinkable, but inevitable. They started discussing God's plan and righteous freedom, justifying sin with scripture. It was no longer just infidelity, it was becoming something much darker. Jonathan wanted to marry Sabrina, and Sabrina, caught between faith and desire, let herself believe the ends could justify the means. They began talking about the logistics of Robert's death. How, where, and when, each conversation more disturbing than the last. Their affair was no longer just a secret. It was a storm brewing quietly, with consequences no one could reverse. On August 17, 2014, Robert Limon went to work at the BNSF railway yard in Tehachapi, California. He had no idea it would be his last shift. That evening, a coworker discovered his body inside the break room. He had been shot in the back of the head and left for dead. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing had been stolen. It looked like a targeted execution. News of Robert's death spread quickly. Friends and neighbors were shocked. Who would kill such a kind, well-liked man? Sabrina played the grieving widow with convincing sorrow. She cried on cue, accepted condolences, and leaned on her church community. Police launched a homicide investigation, but had few leads. Then they started looking into Robert's marriage. That's when they uncovered the affair. Texts, secret email accounts, and call logs between Sabrina and Jonathan told a different story. Suddenly, the motive became clear: a woman in a strained marriage, a younger lover, and a desire to escape. Police tracked Jonathan Hearn, placing him under surveillance. They monitored his movements, recorded his calls, and waited for a mistake, and he made one. In a conversation recorded months later, Jonathan began to admit his involvement in Robert's death. In December 2014, both Jonathan and Sabrina were arrested. The community that once prayed with them was now watching them. Led away in handcuffs. Jonathan eventually confessed. He said he shot Robert to be with Sabrina and that they had planned it together. He told detectives about their affair, their fantasies of a future, and the biblical justification they invented. He even led police to the weapon. Sabrina, however, claimed innocence. She admitted to the affair but denied knowing anything about the murder plot. It became a he said, she said case, but Jonathan had already flipped and agreed to testify against her. The prosecution had texts, confessions, and timelines. The defense had doubt, tears, and a story of manipulation. The stage was set for trial, and the question remained, was Sabrina the mastermind or just another victim? Sabrina Limon's trial began in 2017 in a packed California courtroom. The media swarmed, eager to cover the story of love, religion, and betrayal. Jonathan Hearn, now clean-shaven and shackled, took the stand. He told jurors how he and Sabrina had fallen in love, and how that love turned lethal. He said they prayed about Robert's death, saw it as God's will, and even rehearsed their explanations. His voice was steady, almost cold, as he recalled the day of the murder. According to him, Sabrina helped plan everything. She knew what time Robert worked, gave Jonathan the key, and covered for him after. She even texted Jonathan in code the night of the murder. "Stay safe," read one message short, but telling. The defense tried to paint a different picture. They portrayed Jonathan as obsessed, unstable, and capable of killing alone. Sabrina, they argued, was trapped in a toxic affair. She may have cheated, but she didn't plan murder. But the evidence was overwhelming. Thousands of messages, intimate recordings, and Jonathan's chilling testimony stacked the deck. Even Sabrina's internet searches worked against her. She had looked up funeral arrangements and life insurance policies just days before the killing. Her composure during testimony raised eyebrows. She cried, but never collapsed. Her tone seemed controlled, even calculated. Prosecutors said it was all part of the act. A woman who knew how to charm and manipulate. Even from the witness stand. In 2017, the jury returned its verdict. Sabrina Limon was found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation. The courtroom was silent. She didn't react. No tears. No outburst. Just the weight of consequence. Sabrina was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. She maintained she never wanted Robert dead, claiming she was used by Jonathan. Jonathan Hearn, who cooperated with authorities, received a lesser sentence, 25 years with the possibility of parole. Many saw this as unjust, but the deal was made in exchange for his testimony. To this day, Sabrina's supporters claim the prosecution exaggerated her role. They believe she was caught in a fantasy, but never gave a direct order. The children she once raised now live with relatives. Their mother and father both gone, one buried, the other behind bars. Robert's family said justice was served. They described him as a joyful, loving man whose only mistake was trusting the wrong person. The case still stirs debate online and in true crime circles. Was Sabrina a cold manipulator or simply a lost woman in a destructive affair? Her life, once filled with Bible studies, PTA meetings, and family photos, is now reduced to prison routines. Jonathan, meanwhile, awaits a chance at freedom. but he carries the weight of guilt forever. This case exposed the dark side of spiritual justification. How distorted faith, romantic obsession, and emotional manipulation can lead to irreversible tragedy. There was no redemption in this story, just secrets, death, and the unraveling of two lives once intertwined by passion. Sabrina Limon believed she found salvation in the arms of a younger man, but that embrace led to betrayal, prison, and a name forever tied to murder. In the end, love didn't set her free. It locked her in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're peeling back the layers on a true crime story that, while the sources show, it really just blindsided a quiet desert community. It's a case that kind of forces us to examine how betrayal, a really shocking distortion of faith, and ultimately murder can just fester beneath a seemingly perfect surface. We're diving into the unraveling of Robert and Sabrina Limon. They were a couple in Silver Lakes, California, who projected this image of suburban success, very social, religious, deeply connected.
And that's precisely where our deep dive mission kicks off, isn't it? How does a life apparently built on, faith and family just completely shattered in such a devastating tragedy?
Yeah.
We've meticulously sifted through court documents, investigative reports, personal accounts, really trying to pinpoint the most critical insights from this case. Our goal isn't just reciting facts, but trying to understand those, subtle psychological shifts, the insidious justifications that really pave the way for an irreversible consequence. What's particularly compelling here, I think, is understanding the mechanisms, how a seemingly normal life can just descend into such darkness.
Yeah, let's start with that initial facade then. Robert, he was a steady guy, reliable, worked for a railway company, provided stability. And Sabrina was portrayed as this radiant wife, really active in church, raising their two young kids, you know the picture, hosted barbecues, laughing in church halls, family photos, all seeming contentment. You'd really never suspect the deep cracks forming just beneath that polished surface.
Indeed. And while that public image was one of, let's say, domestic bliss, the sources make it really clear their marriage was deeply troubled. There was significant financial stress, the weight of certain spiritual expectations, and just this growing emotional chasm between them. By around 2012, Sabrina apparently openly confessed her profound unhappiness. She felt disconnected from Robert, despite the life they had, carefully constructed together. She described a sense of, a spiritual and emotional void.
So into this already strained, maybe increasingly hollow marriage steps Jonathan Hearn. What do the sources tell us about him? How did he connect with Sabrina initially?
Right. Jonathan was a young firefighter, over a decade younger than Sabrina, and also a devout Christian. That's important. Their paths crossed through mutual church circles. What's fascinating here is just how quickly their connection intensified. It started as friendship, then moved into flirtation, and then, boom, a full-fledged affair. All meticulously hidden.
Kept secret.
Totally secret. Sabrina apparently found in Jonathan what she felt was missing with Robert. Passionate attention, a sense of emotional safety, maybe even this intense spiritual bond she saw as fulfilling. And Jonathan, for his part, became utterly captivated by her looks, her perceived sadness, what he interpreted as her deep spiritual aura. They were texting constantly, using code words, burner phones, the whole 9 yards to hide it.
Wow.
And as that clandestine connection deepened, so did their desires. And soon, these whispers of a shared future, a life together, started to emerge.
So as those desires grew bolder, it sounds like the reality of Robert's presence just became this undeniable obstacle.
Exactly.
And according to the sources, this is where the story takes a truly chilling turn. So how did they rationalize what came next? What allowed them to go from an affair to something, far more sinister?
Yeah, this brings up one of the most, frankly, unsettling questions in the case, that process of rationalization. The sources really extensively document how, in their, let's call it, increasingly twisted logic, Robert's removal shifted from being unthinkable, maybe, to seeming not just inevitable, but somehow justified.
Justified? How?
Well, They engaged in what psychologists call moral disengagement. This is where people redefine harmful actions as morally okay, often by framing them as necessary steps towards some greater good.
Yeah.
They started talking about God's plan and righteous freedom, and they were selectively using scripture to justify what became a horrific sin. It was like transforming their personal desire into a warped divine mandate.
That's deeply disturbing.
It is. Jonathan wanted to marry Sabrina, and she, sort of caught between her very deep faith and this intense desire for a new future, well, she allowed herself to believe that the ends could somehow justify these terrifying means. Their conversations escalated. They started meticulously detailing the logistics of Robert's death, the how, the where, the when. Each discussion, reportedly, more disturbing than the last, effectively stripping Robert of his humanity in their minds.
That twisted logic is hard to comprehend. What did the sources say about the timeline, specifically Robert's last day? What stood out in the investigation?
Well, the storm that had been brewing quietly, it finally broke on August 17, 2014. Robert Limon went to work at the BNSF railway yard in Tehachapi, California. He had absolutely no idea it would be his last shift. That evening, a coworker found Robert's body inside the break room.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Shot in the back of the head, execution style, no signs of forced entry, nothing stolen. It immediately signaled to investigators this wasn't random, it was targeted.
Right.
News of his death, as you can imagine, sent shockwaves through Silver Lakes. And Sabrina, meanwhile, played the role of the grieving widow with just chilling conviction, crying on cue, accepting condolences, leaning heavily on her church community. Her performance was, according to multiple sources, really a calculated act to divert any suspicion.
So police had few leads at first, but then the investigation turned towards Robert's marriage. What was the breakthrough? What led them to the affair and connecting the dots?
The breakthrough really came from digital evidence, texts, secret email accounts, extensive call logs between Sabrina and Jonathan. They told a profoundly different story than the grieving widow act.
Ah, the digital trail.
Exactly. Suddenly, the motive became glaringly clear. You have a woman in a strained marriage, a younger lover, and this powerful desire to escape their current lives. Police quickly identified Jonathan Hearn as a person of interest. They put him under surveillance, meticulously monitoring his movements, recording his calls, and then he made a crucial mistake.
What was that?
In a conversation recorded months later, Jonathan started to admit his involvement in Robert's death. It provided the first concrete link for investigators.
So, December 2014, they're both arrested. Jonathan confesses, points the finger at Sabrina. What were the key details he gave detectives?
Jonathan confessed he was the shooter, that he shot Robert specifically to be with Sabrina, and crucially, that they had planned it together. He detailed their affair, their share of fantasies of a future, and that really disturbing biblical justification they'd concocted. He even led police to the murder weapon, which obviously solidified his testimony.
But Sabrina denied it.
She did. Sabrina maintained her innocence. She admitted the affair, yes, but adamantly denied any knowledge of or involvement in the murder plot itself. It became that classic he said, she said scenario. But Jonathan had already flipped, meaning he'd made a plea deal to cooperate and testify against Sabrina, presumably for a lighter sentence.
Right, that changes the game for the prosecution.
Absolutely, it changed everything.
So, with Jonathan cooperating, the stage was set for a really dramatic trial. Sabrina Limon's trial kicked off in 2017, packed courtroom, media swarm, the whole thing.
And the central question for the jury was pretty stark, wasn't it? Was Sabrina this cold, calculating mastermind, or maybe just a lost woman caught in a toxic affair? Perhaps even a victim herself in some way.
Exactly. Jonathan Hearn, now clean-shaven, shackled, took the stand as the prosecution's star witness. And he told jurors this chilling story. How he and Sabrina fell in love, and how that love just became lethally twisted. He testified they didn't just talk about Robert's death, they prayed about it, saw it as God's will. They even rehearsed their cover stories, their explanation.
Rehearsed them?
Yeah. His voice, according to reports, was steady, almost detached as he recounted the murder day. He claimed Sabrina helped plan everything. She knew Robert's work schedule. She gave Jonathan a key to the break room and then covered for him afterwards. Even her text to Jonathan that night, "Stay safe." Though short, prosecution framed it as a telling piece of coded communication. That's incredibly damning testimony. But what about the defense? How did they counter that? What was their strategy for Sabrina?
Well, the defense's main strategy was to paint Jonathan as obsessed, unstable, and entirely capable of committing the murder alone. They argued Sabrina was simply trapped in this toxic affair. Yes, guilty of infidelity, but not guilty of planning a murder. They really tried to undermine Jonathan's credibility, suggesting he was lying just to save himself.
Okay, try to shift the blame entirely onto him.
Precisely. But the evidence against Sabrina was, frankly, overwhelming. The prosecution presented thousands of those damning messages, intimate recorded conversations, plus Jonathan's chilling testimony. And even Sabrina's own digital footprint worked against her. Investigators found internet searches she'd done for funeral arrangements and life insurance policies just days before the killing.
Oof, that's bad timing.
Very bad timing. Furthermore, her demeanor during her own testimony raised eyebrows. She cried sometimes, sure, but she never truly broke down. She maintained this controlled, almost calculated composure. Prosecutors argued this was all part of a manipulative act by a woman who knew exactly how to charm and deceive, even from the witness stand.
So 2017, the jury comes back. What was the verdict?
Sabrina Limon was found guilty. Guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation. The courtroom was apparently silent. Reports say she didn't react outwardly. No tears, no outburst. Just the undeniable weight of consequence settling in.
And the sentence?
Sabrina was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. And to this day, she maintains her innocence regarding the murder itself, claiming she was just used by Jonathan. Jonathan Hearn, because he cooperated and testified, received that lesser sentence, 25 years, but with the possibility of parole.
Which caused some controversy, I imagine.
A lot of controversy. Many saw it as unjust, but that was the deal made in exchange for his crucial testimony. The children she once raised, they now live with relatives. Their mother and father both gone, one buried, the other behind bars.
Such a tragedy for them.
Absolutely. Robert's family stated that justice was served, remembering him as this joyful, loving man whose only mistake, in their eyes, was trusting the wrong person. The case still stirs up intense debate, online in true crime circles. Really about Sabrina's true level of culpability. Was she the cold manipulator the prosecution depicted? Or, as her defense argued, maybe just a lost woman caught in a really manipulative and destructive affair? It's a question the sources continue to grapple with, highlighting just how complex shared responsibility can be in these dark situations.
Yeah, this deep dive has really laid bare the shocking unraveling of what looked like a perfect life. It just reveals how quickly that idyllic facade can completely crumble. It really underscores how powerful desire can be and how, when it gets coupled with manipulation and these distorted beliefs, it can twist into something truly, truly destructive.
Absolutely. There was really no redemption in this story, just secrets, death, and the complete unraveling of lives that were once intertwined by passion. Sabrina Limon, it seems, believes she found salvation, a new beginning, in the arms of a younger man. But that embrace, fueled by distorted faith and a chilling willingness to rationalize the unthinkable, led instead to betrayal, prison, and a name forever tied to murder. In the end, love didn't set her free at all. It locked her in. This case really forces us to confront how far people can descend when they start justifying their darkest desires. What aspect of this unsettling case resonates most with you?